Alrighty, so today we're talking about Ben Mallah. Mallah? Ben Mallah? Ben Mallah. Ben Mallah. We're talking about Ben Mallah. So one of the things I have learned from Ben is this rags to riches concept is totally possible. I mean, he talks all the time about how he really came from nothing. He grew up in this tiny little house. I think he even has some videos up on YouTube where he takes the camera crew to the house that he used to live in. I forget where exactly it is, but it's really amazing what he's been able to accomplish. And he's gotten to this point where he can kind of do whatever he wants and have whatever he wants. And he's very quick to point out that it takes a lot of work to get there, but it's absolutely possible to do. One of the other things I think is super interesting about this whole concept is he often talks about how he did have to make some serious sacrifices along the way. He talks about how he sacrificed relationships with his family in certain respects. He sacrificed certain things for his family that his family couldn't have, that he would have wanted them to have, knowing that they would be able to have those things later in life. And he's also, very transparent about the fact that he thinks that those sacrifices that he made and that his family made are probably carried with them later into life and affect them now that they had to live through those sacrifices. But at the same time, they now have a very comfortable lifestyle. So it's never without sacrifice that any of this stuff comes, but it is possible to do. And I think Ben is a great model of that. So that's one of the first things that I learned and was really impressed upon me by Ben. So one other thing, really specific to renting to other people in real estate when you own real estate, but it's a really interesting concept that I've learned from Ben, is to really focus on having your tenants be either really young people or really old people. And the reason Ben says this is because college students aren't too picky. If you have, some kind of real estate venture that is near a college campus, it's often super easy to get college students who are, willing to accept maybe not slumlord conditions, but maybe subpar conditions, maybe not a super expensive, super nice place. College students are going to be okay with that. So that's why he says focus on really young clientele for those kinds of circumstances. And then Ben also says focus on really elderly people because they're not super fussy. They tend not to move around very much. They tend not to break things. They tend not to, make a big fuss about things, generally speaking. They kind of find a place they like, check it out, and then once they're willing to purchase or rent it, they're usually pretty content there and don't cause a lot of trouble for you. So that's why those two demographics, the really young and the really old, are Ben's favorites to rent to, and I thought that was super interesting. So the third big thing that I've learned from Ben is you would be surprised what you can get if you just ask for it. And I think this is really impressive in a lot of his videos, whether he's doing a real estate deal or purchasing a car, whatever it might be, he's always willing to negotiate and haggle. And I can see how it could be super annoying for some of the people he's working with, but he always ends up getting the best deal possible. And he says all the time that you really need to ask for things if you want them. They're not just going to be handed to you, but just because they're not handed to you and readily available does not mean that people aren't going to be willing to work with you to affect those outcomes. So one example that Ben gives that I think is super interesting that relates to this whole ask for what you want thing is he literally talks about calling up a bank to ask for a higher credit score. So I don't know if he's actually done this or if he knows someone who's done this, and it seems totally absurd. But if you think about it, what's the worst that could happen? You could get laughed out of the room, you could get hung up on if you're making a phone call. But other than that, there's really no downside to just asking for what you want. And if nothing else, if you're willing to do that and willing to get laughed at, then you're in a pretty good place confidence-wise to negotiate with other people for other things and ask for what you want in the future. Okay, so a couple questions that I have for Ben. One is, would you ever buy a property in cash? He talks a lot about always using credit, always using banks. Banks are your friend. Use tax laws to your advantage when you're buying a home for the first time or when you're selling a home and immediately buying another one. But he talks about banks and credit and using that all the time. So I would just be really interested to know if he's ever purchased a property in cash, and if so, when and what were the circumstances, and would he ever do that again? So another question I have for Ben is, what are your feelings about leaving money and property that you've acquired to your heirs, to your children? He talks again a lot about how anyone can go from rags to riches, but it takes a lot of work. And I would just be interested to know if he feels that the journey is a really important part of the process and something that he would want for his children, such that he would not leave any of his assets to his children, or maybe he would set up a trust for them to access things at a certain point in their life. But I'd just be interested to know what Ben thinks about that. So the last question I have for Ben is, do you ever feel like you had to sacrifice your physical or mental health in order to achieve what you've achieved? Just looking at him, he's not the healthiest person in the world. He's carrying some extra weight. He smokes a lot. And I'm wondering if he regrets any of the physical or mental side effects of reaching the success that he's reached. Again, he talks a lot about the sacrifices he's made, but he never talks at all, I don't think, about his physical and mental health. And that's something that's obviously really important. You want to maintain that so you can enjoy the success that you've worked so hard to achieve. So those are my questions for Ben, and my few thoughts about what I've learned from him. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate it. Tune in again. We'll have more of these kinds of videos, and I appreciate it. Thanks so much.